Uh, Welcome to this Thermodynamics 2 pre-conference series. Today we have a opportunity to hear from Professor Dobija, and I would like to request Professor Martin to introduce Professor Dobija and introduce talk, and we'll get started. Martin.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ram. Welcome all of you. I represent Cracow University of Economics Accounting Department as all my team present on today's session, and our professor Mieczyslav Dobija and Jurij Renkas, PhD, are going to present the thermodynamic nature of time work. And apart from me, there is also Professor Bartosz Kurek and Professor Artur Hołda, also from the accounting department. And I'm very pleased to have this opportunity to introduce Professor Mieczyslav Dobija, who is working on the relations between physics and economics for many years. And let's say that this is we are joining this conference for the second time. The first time was in 2020, and we really enjoyed it. So thank you, Ram, for your kind invitation once again. And Professor Dobija and Jurij Renkas are going to present the new work on thermodynamics, nature of time, which is continuum of the work showing the relations between physics, science, and economics. So thank you for this opportunity to introduce our speakers, and the floor is yours, Mieczyslav and Jurij. Thank you very much.
Professor Chairman, professors, very regarded audience. Let us please to introduce first an essence of our approach to puzzle and challenge of time. Knowing that sages such as Newton and Kant could not use thermodynamics when discussing the concept of time, we decided to this puzzle would lead to a presentation of the current explanation of the nature of time. We wish to present an update of the concept of time given by Newton and Kant, with an appropriate application of the knowledge of thermodynamics and the man. When Newton speaks of a steady flow of time, the question of the rate of this flow naturally arises. We might ask whether Newton could have estimated this rate. Newton must have been familiar with the provision of the person called Lord, Genesis 3, limiting the life of man to 120, now confirmed by gerontologists. On this basis, he could have estimated this rate. We discovered this constant value in economic studies, among other including stock returns on New York Stock Exchange, and then concluded that it is also a time constant. Then the key word came up, metabolism. Metabolism is a series of processes that control how our bodies create and use energy. After all, the rate of human aging and duration must be related to metabolism. People are looking for some explanation, and the reconciliation of the years of Adam's life, 930. We weren't looking for that, but it all became clear. What was needed was an understanding that this was related to the activity of Prometheus, who has transformed humanity to modern man. This is by no means a story about the creation of man, but about the transformation performed by Prometheus. Adam's family is not the first, but the last before the flood. This information, as well as the person called Lord, cannot be ignored when we consider nature of time. So please be patient and listen to what we have to say. We claim to have succeeded in updating the concept of time created by Newton and Kant. Thanks to thermodynamic knowledge, the updated definition allows for time not to exist or to exist. Please look, no people, no time. To be absolute or not. If people live only on the planet Earth, so this time can be absolute. Time can run faster or slower. Our time ran 8 times faster than Adam time. After this introduction, let's move on to the formal presentation. So we have this famous definition, and we see here adjectives: absolute, true, mathematical, time, and flows uniformly, independently. So, but we should put attention to Sir Arthur Eddington. Our intuitive sense of time passage is so powerful that it must correspond to something in the objective world. If science cannot get purchase on it, one might say, well, so much the worse for science. This sentence found in the book by Jim Holt helped us to define the transformation in which personal human capital is created. And longer numerous inquiries into the nature of time have led Professor David Park to the view that the passage of time does not need to be explained by physics. That would fit because we are not physicists. And there is a physicist like Mr. Didi whose talk about time annoys us because of his unworthy criticism of Newton. Perhaps this view is the result of the belief that physical paradigm narrow the issues and hinder a comprehensive view of nature of time. In our consideration, when necessary for some substantive reason, we do not respect the orthodox materialistic scientific creed as discussed by Rupert Sheldrake. Since the creator decided that humans would only be able to live to 120, and scientific research confirmed this, the information in Genesis is a relevant source that should be fairly cited. So this is this famous statement. To answer our question about Newton, we could say that taking into account the number 1 to 0 years created an opportunity to determine the rate of passage of time. The lack of thermodynamics was crucial, but there was a chance if he knew Euler's number. Of course, Euler lived more than 100 years later. But this figure, this famous E, comes from Leibniz, who discovered this constant during his work on differential calculus. Much later, Leonhard Euler gave this mathematical constant its modern designation E and details some of its amazing properties. Anyway, Newton could have written the equation. Where 1 represents energy of life, times power 2, this is the years and the rate. And minus, because this disappears, is vanishing. And the right side is the 0, but biological 0. We know that this function is always positive. So then we have the rough estimation 0.083 or 2. Gerontologists clearly indicate that the end of human life is 120 years. So at that time, primary vital energy of life, PVE, reaches biological zero. We say biological and not mathematical, of course. And we have putting this value of 0.08, we have the value of this function as we see, this or 0.00% of the initial PVE. This is rough estimate of this natural constant, otherwise already known and tested for at least 2 decades. For many years, we have written about the energy of life being transformed into human capital. But Eddington's indication caused a deeper interest and perception of the PVE. And this PVE, it appears, is well known in the world. So, our definition of time. Time is the process of transformation of the stock of primary vital energy of modern man into the ability to perform work. That is to say, personal human capital. The rate of passage of time is constant and independent of anything. This rate is determined by the natural constant A. We believe that the given definition of time complements Newton's conception and, moreover, is consistent with the understanding of time presented by Immanuel Kant. In this definition, concrete real elements appear, such as the primary vital energy, modern man, personal human capital, the process of energy transformation, and the uniformity of this process, the rate of which is determined by a natural constant. All these terms need clarification. Let's first see these nice 3 photos. It shows how this PV energy is changing into the human capital. And on the beginning of this process, it goes very quickly, because we have an infant, a 1-year-old child, and a 2-year-old child. So we see what is a great change in 2 years. But in case, for example, me, if someone could see me a year ago, so now he would say, the same man, nothing is changed. Nothing is changed from the outer look, but in the inner body, I feel it. So PV is lost after the first years in the 8%. This is slightly less than that 8%. That's because quality of this function. So looking at this picture, we can construct this function showing the passage of time, that t is e power to at with minus. Figure 1 shows the 3 line. The first E is a real one, because this is how this PVE disappear in time. And we see it as it goes quickly to the coordinate of time. This is at 65 years. This is time to go to retire. So it is very close to this coordinate. And line H is the human capital, but this is adjusted because we divided the real line by the maximum capital in the year 70. So, but the shapes are the same. And the third line is the real power, also adjusted to 1. And this real power of body or organism is difference between the physiological power and idle power. So we have such a flat maximum, which is very important, and each thinking being should take into regard and change something in his life, if want to live according to the disposition. So this PV energy was well known in China. It was and is known as Qi energy. Hua Qinnan, writing about the essence of Qi, described it as the primary energy of the body is like a hidden treasure that comes with life. This is very important information. This knowledge is clarified by Pitchford, who points to 3 sources of Qi energy. The first source is called Yunnan Qi, this one. It is this one PVE energy. According to ancient knowledge, it is inherited from parents and passed on to the offspring. The energy resources is limited and is used up over time. An unfavorable lifestyle leads to additional loss of this energy. The energy of life is known as Qi China, Prana India, Mana Polynesia, Ki Japan, Fire of the Spirit Tibet. From the course of the E-line, it can be seen that it at least from the age of 45, in order to prolong one's life, one should take conscious steps to obtain additional life energy from available sources. A human with knowledge and will to last can use 2 more sources of life energy after than PVE. Source 2 is energy extracted from consumed food, and source 3 is energy from the air, extracted through the lungs and skin. Mauchigny, in the book The Yellow Emperor Classic of Medicine, discusses the successive 8-year stages of human development in terms of kidney energy, which is synonymous of PVE, and states that by 64 years of life, kidney exhaustion, fatigue, and weakness occur. This low state of PVE can be clearly seen in figure 1. As we know, this is the period of reaching retirement age. Now about the modern man. It is said that modern man was created by Prometheus. This was best depicted by Aeschylus. So let's give him the floor, if it is possible.
Do not, I pray you, suppose that I am holding my peace from pride or self-will, but by reflection am I gnawed to the heart, seeing myself thus ignominiously entreated. And yet who but myself defined completely the prerogative for these same new gods? But on these matters I say nothing, for I should speak to you already acquainted with these things. But for the misfortunes that existed among mortals, hear how I made them, that aforetime lived as infants, rational, and possessed of intellect. And I will tell you, having no complaint against mankind, as detailing the kindness of the boons which I bestowed upon them. They who at first seeing saw in vain, hearing they heard not, but, like to the forms of dreams, for a long time they used to huddle together all things at random, and naught knew they about brick-built and sunward houses, nor carpentry, but they dwelt in the excavated earth like tiny emmets in the sunless depths of caverns. And they had no sure sign either of winter, or of flowery spring, or of fruitful summer, but they used to do everything without judgment, until indeed I showed to them the risings of the stars and their settings, hard to be discerned.
These are very powerful words. I feel it, but in my native language. So we have such a fact. The Lord Creator sends an expedition to transform the human race. Human lifespan should not exceed 120. A violation of procedure occurs, resulting in the birth of the race of awful giants. The Creator orders a local flood, and it was at the beginning of the 4th millennium BC. It's time to reason that time passes now at the rate 8%. Before it was passing at the rate of 1%. Like man, like time. The data on the number of years of life of the members of Adam's line allow us to calculate the characteristics for those people. And given that Adam lived 930, so we write this equation, and instead of A, I use letter B, and it can compute. We see that is 1% per year. The metabolism of the members of Adam's lineage was much slower than it is today. For them, the time lapse constant was equal to B or equal 1. And also, we see that Adam has the first offspring being at the age 130. This means that the level of the energy PVA was 0.27. If the mother had a similar number of years, she still had a large body power. A modern 18-year-old has a PVE 0.24. So it is comparable. So this is comparable. In those days, there also there were also births to very young women of about 70 years of age. So now I move to the studies on the economic constant of potential capital growth. Albert Einstein is credited with discovering the compound interest rule 72. Referring to compound interest, Einstein is quoted as saying, "It is the great mathematical discovery of all time." Whether a joke or not, the formula CT, the capital after t years, is equal C0 times e power to RT, where I is the rate, is the nucleus of the general model of capital. Christopher Bliss has expressed that we do not know what capital is and are unlikely to find out. We certainly will not find out without knowledge of thermodynamics. Thermodynamics is already manifested in the simple model of compound interest through the variable of initial capital C0 its necessity for existence, since nothing will arise from nothing. Einstein introduced the rule 72, indicating after how many years the initial capital will double at a given interest rate R, which shows that he was toying with it. It is a fact that the compound interest formula is important. After all, it is the main mathematical tool in this study. To create a general model of capital, it is necessary to recognize the structure of the rate determining the change in initial capital C0. This is the structure of the variable R. So our theoretical studies led to the model R is equal A minus S plus M, where S is the rate of disappearance of capital. This is the second principle. M, capital inflow by labor, A, constant. Thus, the general model of capital after one period is presented as here. And what is important is interpretation. The interpretation with respect to human capital is as follows. An infant is born, variable C0. This infant subject only to the influences of the forces of nature. The second principle could die. The work of parents and society offset the negative influence of the forces of nature. So the infant develops and grows due to change of PVE, which is quantified by the constant A and variable AT. It should be emphasized that the inflow of capital through the work of parents can only level the destructive influences. It is not possible to create a stock of life energy or to accelerate its transformation into human capital. That is to accelerate the course of time. The child will develop at the natural rate regardless of the surplus efforts of the parents. Labor does not increase capital. Labor is merely a transfer of capital, but competent labor counteracts entropy. So the second principle forces upon us wise, effective action. So the economic processes in which capital gains or income are sought are interpreted similarly. By definition, income is the periodical increase of beginning capital, delta C. So we have such a formula that is C0 multiplied by this factor. And interpret. A company must have initial capital, C0, the first principle, which is affected by forces that dissipate equity capital, minus S. The work of the staff tries to offset the impact of the second principle, M. If successful, return on our assets, ROA, is close to A. In some cases, it is possible that this ratio is greater than A, which happens at the expense of other firms, or this is the result of the emergence of highly creative intellectual capital. This is another source of capital. Concluding these topics, let us note that the economy is powered by nature. We are not talking about raw material resources, which in economics are not valued in monetary terms. They are measured in natural units. The GDP is mainly created by labor. This can be seen as the sum of wages and salaries, annual depreciation amounts of fixed assets and profits, and some taxes. The value of fixed assets is amounts of fixed assets. The value of fixed assets is determined by the work done in previous periods. The labor that has coagulated. The source of labor is human capital, which, as the definition of time reveals, arises after the PV conversion. Thus, there are two sources of power to the economy. The sun, which provides biomass growth at the rate typically exceeding 0.08, the universe as the provider of PV life energy. Economic processes generating GDP take place with the help of constant A, which also determines the rate of passage of time. One can say that this constant induces the saying, time is money, with content. So we have such a scheme which explains us the share of nature in the production, exchange, and distribution processes. We have these three boxes: human capital, assets, and forces of nature as a source of labor, then work, and the very important ratio wage productivity. The output is always products and services and wage receivables. This is the legal, economics, and accounting concept. Very, very important because in fact this is money. Exchange of work receivables for product and vice versa is made on the market. This is the essence of money goods economy. Forces of nature consideration reveals the second force of nature beside the well-known photosynthesis. When a woman gives birth to a child, the additional potential of PV appears in the world. This potential transforms over the year into labor resources. Work reduces entropy, and innovation plus invention increase wealth. As Professor Terry Bristol said, science plus art creates effective engineering. This is a very important and nice statement, because in fact, everything what is advancing is according to this theme. And this is also some incentive to our research, because we have some progress in the measuring of creative capital. And this is the end of the part one. And now Yuri will introduce how the empirical study allows to and led to the discovering of the constant A. Please.
Dear Professor Chairman, dear audience, I'm pleased to present an empirical study on the identification of the economic constant A. Many studies initiated by the estimation of the financial risk premium have identified and determined an economic constant of E equal 0.08 a year, which is related to the issue raised above, but it needs to say that it is not possible to create an appropriated theoretical model, as pointed out by Helge Graf, writing that the fundamental constant does not derive from any known physical theory and cannot be expressed by any other constants. For this reason, the presented constants can only be revealed through empirical studies. This constant controls the fairness of wages, prices, profit rates, and is a reference figure for discount and interest rates. We will analyze empirical studies revealing the occurrence of the economic constants by three research areas. First of all, the manifestation of the economic constant in the issue of capital growth. Secondly, the manifestation of the economic constants in wage expectation, and disclosure of the economic constants in empirical studies of rates of returns. Yes, let's start with the first area. The economic constant is an example of a constant whose applications provide indispensable, among other things, in human capital measurement theory. The human body acting on the model of a heat engine loses some of the energy gained from food and must have a heated shelter to live and act. As explanation by Peter Atkin, the abstract heat engine in our body is dispersed among all the cells in our body and takes thousands of different forms. The author explains the operation of the heat engine in the body so the ATP molecules, which thanks to enzyme transform into ADP and release energy. Mieczyslaw describes the thermodynamics of the human body states. From the thermodynamic points of view, the human body is a kind of engine. It requires, as in technical engineers, fuel supply. The fuel in this case is food, are carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. When introduced into the body, the nutrients are drawn into the metabolic modes and burned into simple compounds, mainly CO2 and H2O. In this process, energy is realized. In the muscles, this energy can be partly converted into mechanical energy, manifesting itself in the form of isometric or isotonic contractions. The vast majority, over 80%, is, as in the engine, heat. As it turns out, all of this is not without an impact on the amount of wage necessary for the existence of preservation of human capital. It is important to note that the category of human capital, that is the ability of a person to perform competent work, can be measured. To proceed this with the measurement of human capital, it is important to note that in fact, allowed priceless as a gift of nature has no attribute of economic value. Therefore, we estimate the value of human capital by taking into account the stream of inputs for the cost of living and professional education. Thus, the value of human capital is the function of the stream of inputs of annual cost of living and life energy, the level of which is quantified by a constant. The empirical verified formula for measuring capital is like presented on the slide, where T is the number of years until adulthood, and is the annual cost of living outlay. U is the coefficient of summing the capitalized outlays. Capital H, on the other hand, represents the potential of a person's ability to do work, which naturally dissipates. This is clear because the human organism can be treated unambiguously as a heat engine that must lose some energy in order to work. This is explained in an interesting way by Peter Atkins, pointed to the role of ATP and ADP molecules. It follows, therefore, that for economic equilibrium, not allowing for depreciation of human capital of an employer, it is necessary to balance this random and spontaneous loss of a capital with appropriate remuneration for work. This leads to the equation that defines the variable of equals fair remuneration, where S is the rate of spontaneous and random dissipation. W is an equivalent to labor compensation. The W equation provides the basis for performing empirical tests of both the size of the constants A and the size of existing wage when examining whether actual wage preserve worker capital. Taking as basis the cost of living in countries where wages are known to be close to fair values, in particular the USA and Western Europe, we can estimate the value of the random variable S based on the formula of S, where W is the real wages. In the case of the teenager under consideration, there are no cost of professional education, so the human capital model is determined solely on the basis of capitalized cost of living, where K is an annual cost of living for a person in a family of 4. Table 1 presents the result of estimating the random variable S from the actual minimum wage in the indicate European countries and selected US states. Workers were assumed to be 17 years old to standardize the results. For example, in the UK, the statutory minimum wage is set at £8.91 per hour. Adding the 30.8% employer social security tax to this amount result in the total cost of employing a worker. On a monthly basis, this is £1,785. The monthly cost of living in the UK is estimated to be £5,068. Therefore, S is equal 0.0867. In other selected European countries or the US state, the estimation leads to similar results. The important relation suggested by Table 1 is the quality, the average value from S equal A, or the weak inequality, the average value from S less than or equals to A. What does this mean? By the definition of time, the constant can be looked at as the rate of which human labor resources are supplied from external source, from nature. In turn, labor transforms human capital to labor object, which then becomes products and assets subject to entropy growth. Thus, if the random variables S that determines the rate of dissipation of human capitals satisfies the indicate relationship, it can be expected the destruction does not necessarily prevail over construction. It should be emphasized that this opinion can be made under the natural assumption of openness of the system called human. Another general observation result from the calculation in Table 1 is the conclusion that the constant determines the growth rate of human capital, which leads to the formulation of the theory of remuneration as a function of this capital. Moreover, the result of calculations confirms that the minimum wage is higher developed countries of Europe and states of the USA is determined by the constant A equal 0.08. This fact is associated with corresponding higher labor productivity in this country. Given the relation A equal the average value from S, equation presented above transforms to the form where W is the fair wage that offers the natural spontaneous loss of human capital. In order to provide independent evidence that the estimated wage are fair and to give scientific weight to this category, Table 2 is presented which contains a count made on average cost of living and minimum wage in the United States. For the calculation, it is assumed that two parents receive earnings at the theoretical minimum wage calculated for a 70-year-old teenager. The theoretical minimum wage calculates like 8% on the value of the capitalized annual cost of living, which is estimated based on the average monthly cost of living in the United States. The result is an amount of $1,694 per month. On the other hand, the statutory monthly minimum wage in the United States on average is at $1,705 per month. The calculations in Table 2 shown the key role of the constant A in determining wage that preserve workers' personal capital, assuming the made that the contribution of the pension fund is 20% of the salary, the contribution to health care coverage in 10% of the salary, the remaining age is 65 years, the family consists of 2 adults and 2 descendants, the average number of life years is 85, and the percentage of capitalization of the pension's contribution is 3%. Under this natural assumption and a given constant value as a theoretical wage, and so the worker's personal capital does not depreciate and depreciate, and that is a fair wage. In poorer countries, such as Ukraine, minimum wage are usually far from the set. However, it is possible to study wage expectation in relation to their possible dependence on the constant. This type of research was conducted using data provided by questionnaires from labor offices in 5 different regions of Ukraine. 3,920 job seekers were surveyed asking for the data necessary to calculate the value of their human capital, its age, education, work experience, and their expected wage if hired. The general models for measuring the personal capital in this case included several more variables. There are the cost of professional education, the number of years of professional work, the length parameter which allows to use a modified Leon curve to measure capital gains through experience. And the choice of the survey location is dictated by the fact that the job seekers does not manifest excessive expectation, but counts the cost of living for the full family. By comparing the theoretical wages with the expected wages indicated by the respondents, the percentage of complaints of these wages and the value of the constants were estimated. By the statistic of the set of determinant value of the constant and the obtained average value of the complaints percentage for respondents are presented in Table 3. As we can see, the statistical percentage in table indicate a very high level of agreement between the wage expected and those determined on the basis of the theoretical model, which include in the calculation the constant A. Thus, it is shown that job seekers' wage expectations are a function of the economic constant, confirming its value and at the same time indicating its economic significance. This demonstrates the profound impact of this constant on the economic reality of human capital growth and equivalent wages. Among respondents, the mean value of A in light of wage expectation with a very small standard deviation is close to the magnitude of 0.08 which confirms the hypothetical value. Additionally, the probability distribution is leptokurtic, indicating a high clustering of the magnitude A around the value of 8%. Figure 2 shows a histogram of the frequency of the corresponding magnitude A in the overall data set of 3,920 surveys from 5 regions. Another study example concerns the wage expectation of economic graduates in Poland. Bartosz Kurek and Ireneusz Górowski presented a cross-sectional study of wage expectation in terms of a constant A and the impact of various variables on its magnitude. The empirical study confirmed the hypothesis that a constant A is manifesting in the wage expectations of graduates. As expected from the time determination, the constant A appears in the measurement of human capital as an important variable. The rate of capitalizations of inputs. In addition, the constant was also found to determine the rate of dissipation of human capital. And thus was used to create a fair wage model. It can be shown further that the constant also relates itself in the study of business profit rates and stock returns. This is because profits are created by human labor, that is, transform of human capital to products. Research in this field has long been conducted on the assessment of the risk premium. This quality, defined as the difference between the real rate of return and the return of treasury bills in the US, is a component of the CAMP model, which has strongly lost its values in the current time. To calculate the rate of return based on the table 4, the percent of inflation with subtract from the stock return, resulting in the value of 9.27% calculated according to the arithmetic means. However, according to the geometric means, it is 7.39%. To review, at a point estimate the arithmetic average to these two numbers was calculated and a value of 9.285% was obtained. In the case of stock market information, corporate earning reporting, the date determines the value of the end of the calculations year. Thus, if capital multiplies at a rate of 8% ex ante, then at the end of the year exposed, it reaches a multiplication of about 8.33%. Thus, the estimation determines that a priori A equals 0.08. Rate of returns on investment capital in economic entities were examined, among others, by Bartosz Kurek. The research was conducted on a sum of financial statements of companies belonging to the Standard & Poor 1,500 index over a period of 20 years. The total number of observations is a sample reached 22,952 financial reports. The result of Bartosz Kurek's statistical test confirmed the hypothesis of a mean exposed risk premium of 8.33%. The constant under consideration is also found in the interest rates set by the loan agreements of the old days. This was especially true for farms. Indeed, Anna Pikulska-Robaszkiewicz indicates that in Republican Rome, the law specified an interest rate on loans not exceeding 8%. What two important conclusions can be drawn from empirical studies of the economic constant? First of all, the considered constant manifests itself in different issues and in different ways. And secondly, this constant can be estimated from date of any country. Thus, there is a disclosure of the economic constant, which brings the economic and natural science together.
For the end of our presentation, I try to give some summary, but first a word about Newton. The challenging question is whether time is absolute and what does that mean. Probably Newton did not connect the passage of time with the consciousness of man. Possibly he sought a higher being according to the time in which he lived. Higher being is everlasting. Concluding the consideration about Newton's conception, we state that it is mainly the historical conditions that can distort the judgment about the substantial value and civilization meaning of the definition of time introduced by this sage. When one lives in the age of universal admiration of the work of the Creator and create the mechanic of the heavens oneself by discovering divine intention and laws, it is natural to attribute the creation of time to a higher being and not to human consciousness. In a sense, this is correct, since the disposition that man is to live 1 to 0 years is equivalent to the existence of time-lapse constant 8%. A decision about the number of years of life expectancy is also a decision about the rate at which time passes. A word about Kant. Kant related time to human sensuality and intellect, which is apt because we feel the passage of time physically and mentally, so we also need an explanation of its nature. This paper explains that the nature of time is thermodynamics and points to the corresponding process of energy transformation in the human body. As a result of this transformation, human capital is created, which drives economic processes. Throughout the work of Kant, time gained a philosophical basis and a connection to human consciousness. As we know, Kant regarded senses as important tools of cognition that are necessary to supplement the knowledge provided by intellect. Time is empirically real thanks to sensory cognition, which reflects the states and order of succession of real objects. So now the most important word about Albert Einstein and Julian Barber. When talking about the important concepts of time, well, one cannot leave an Albert Einstein. Although it was said, woe to inferior beings when they come between the blades of mighty swordsmen, but the situation forces us to take a stand, which is significantly facilitated by the power of Barber's intellect. According to our definition, time is not what clock measures, but they are needed for various purposes. A factual argument on this issue is presented by Barber. The theory of relativity is not at all concerned with the abstract concept of time. It describes physical devices called clocks. There is nothing impossible about that idea that clocks moving past us at high speed should appear to go slower than the watch we wear on our hand. The movement of a clock could change the rate of which it ticks. The title of Einstein's main article introducing the theory of relativity indicates that the author is dealing with the electrodynamics of object in motion and not the theory of abstract time. So, concluding the defense of Isaac Newton's formula of time, it is necessary to react to the claim that time does not exist. But it was told at the very beginning. So we see that time may not exist because it depends on existence of humans. No humans, no people, no time. But the second principle works consciously, continuously. So this time capsules described by Julian Barbour still grows. And therefore we, and also our presentation shows that the time, I feel time as the arrow of time. So the role of knowledge of thermodynamics is, as can be seen from the presented investigation, very helpful in explaining the issues of time and the effects of economic process taking place in time. The influence of this science is comprehensive because where the concept of energy operating in isolated object and unautonomous system of the living world appears, the thermodynamics is indispensable for the construction of theory. There is no exaggeration in the terms coined by Peter Actin, such as four laws that drive universe, entropy, or the engine of change, and other. An extremely constructive feature of the second purpose is that it forces living organisms to act to contain entropy in order to prolong duration. In the case of humans, it compares logical thinking and productive purposeful work. The synthesis of the principles of thermodynamics, knowledge of the primordial energy of life, human consciousness, include the knowledge of the astronomical calendar, emerges and understanding the time of planet Earth. Thank you for your attention and interest in this topic. At the end, I have to apologize to the honorable audience for my poor speaking and reading. I have difficulties even in my language, so also in foreign one. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, doctors, and you did very well. I thought you spoke very clearly, so please don't put yourself down on that. So, there was a question in the chat about whether you will be sharing your slides.
Actually, I think if Professor Dobija, you can send the slides to me, and then I'll be very happy to distribute to the participants.
Oh, yes. So we will send you PowerPoint, full PowerPoint, with pleasure.
I have one question. Like I saw one equation you have presented somewhere has a kind of similarity with the what Thomas Piketty was showing earlier. Is it just a coincidence, or it has some relation with his work of growth of rate of the capital?
You know, it was 2 decades we worked on the theory of human capital and capital. And we still, everywhere manifested this constant, 8%. But this human capital did not appear so simply that the child or me eat a plate of oat and it grows so quickly and with the rich human capital. We always ask, and we understood and we wrote that it is the conversion of the raw energy of life into the human capital.
That's very impressive.
But recently we got such information, thank you, Jim Holt again, and his writings, and we could see this famous statement by Sir Arthur Eddington, who told clearly there must be something in the real world, and this what we understood. It was PV energy which is converted to the human capital, and nobody can find another energy. Although we can ask about dog or cat. Dog or cat has A equal close to 20%, but they do not have human consciousness. Time is related with the consciousness, and this is the input of Kant. So these all together explain that the joint the concept of Newton, concept of time, and this thermodynamics.
That's really, thank you for your answer. And if anybody on the audience has some questions, please unmute yourself and please ask directly to the presenters.
Professor Kurek did very important research. Please tell something about it, because there are two kinds. Research on thousands of statements and financial statements, and research on human capital.
Wage expectations.
Wage expectations.
So what I can say is a couple of years ago, actually it was I think more than 10 years ago, we were wondering what is the actual rate of return on assets of companies that were listed at that time on the New York Stock Exchange. We took the index Standard & Poor's 1500, and we've looked at financial statements of these companies over the last 20 years. And of course, we know that economics is a non-zero game. So basically, in the long run, the return on assets should be above zero. But the question was how much above zero should it be? When we analyze a single financial statement of a single company from any random year, we can get a random number. Of course, it can be plus 1%, minus 7%, plus 20%. But if we take a set of companies, let's say 1,500 companies, then the average of return on assets is much more stable. And if we take any single 10 years, and we take again the average of the return on assets for a particular company, again, it becomes more and more stable. So if we take 1,500 companies and we'll take a look at the 20-year life, 20-year time span, we'll get an average of return on assets of around 8%. But of course, we are talking about the return on assets, which is the very specific measure, because in the numerator we need to have a pre-tax income, which is the outcome of operations before the increase of capital is divided into shareholders and into the government, let's say. And of course, we had to remove special items from pre-tax income, because special items, actually not special items, extraordinary items, if I remember correctly, extraordinary items are beyond the risk of a particular company. So everything, all that is disclosed in financial statements. So for example, in one state, let's say American state, a hurricane is within the normal risk of operations, so it won't be disclosed as a extraordinary item. But in another state, hurricane may be an extraordinary item, and then it has to be removed from the pre-tax income. So summing up, the economy is a non-zero game, and the average return on assets of companies that were included in the Standard & Poor's 1,500 index was around 8%. And this was the average over the 20-year time span. But we got the similar results if we had the time span of 10 years. And actually, if you've got a time span of 5 years, it will be also very, very close to 8%. So the increase of companies and the increase of years makes the return of assets a stable number, which is very, very close to 8%.
That's really great, and thank you for helping. And actually here I want to mention the work of Professor Tim Garrett from University of Utah. And he has kind of studied the relation between the energy and the economic growth, and he also came up with some constant. There exists some constant between that energy and the economy, rate of economic growth. I'm not sure how these two research compare with each other, but I see he's the other researcher who have shown this relationship. And I'll put that link on the chat. Are there any other questions?
What I may add, so there is also, and it is good to know, when we do research about the stock exchange, as we understand, when we buy stock, so stock is not correlated with any cost. I don't think about the cost of purchasing. Product is correlated with the cost of product. So this is a clear trade. So there manifest only the clear inflow of the outer energy. Truly speaking, it is the work of sun, photosynthesis. And of course, it is difficult to believe it. And this is also difficult to accept such a explanation, because if someone buy stocks, often lose his her money. And but in the long run, 8 years, it shows that it is 8%. So if there is no cost, no cost, no revenues, so what is it, this 8%? We looked another on this problem, then it was done, and probably it is now in the USA. There is seeking for the risk premium. Risk is the reason for the loss, but this is the problem is in the real rate of return. Fortunately, the real rate of return is close to the risk premium, because this 3 months treasury bills is equal to inflation. So we deduct inflation and seeking for the real rate of return. And it's close to the risk premium. But theoretically, our approach is correct.
That's really great presentation, and I really appreciate you linking it to the share market and inflation and kind of risk. If we don't have any further question, then probably it's time to wrap up this great presentation by Professor Dobija and Jurij from Cracow University of Economics. Okay, seems like there is no questions. That's the case. Probably we'll call this a day. And thank you, Professor Dobija and Jurij, for this great presentation, Thermodynamics, Nature of Time. We look forward to meeting you again at Thermodynamics Conference, July 18 to 20, 2022. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for your participation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Bartosz.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye.